John Trallow, Gloria Pyan, Christopher Husser, DODDS, Jonathan Orchard, and me, your anchor, Dr. Robin Falco.
If you decide not to volunteer, it will not be held against you in any way.
Sounds dangerous.
It is very dangerous.
Count me in.
And that's right here, Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps.
Enjoy your
Extra big ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another?
Extra big ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is zero. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase. I'm sorry you had to help. I'm sorry you had to
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So, if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our Seed Pack Special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need as humans to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps. Freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What are we doing live? It goes in time.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Revising Reality. I'm your host, Tim Kaiser, and I have a very special two-part show for you tonight on Revising Reality. We are going to be discussing the evidence for directed energy weapons on 9/11 via Judy Wood's book, Where Did the Towers Go? Dr. Judy Woods, I should say, and the artificial disaster at Fukushima, and all the Freedom of Information Act documents related to such a thing. It's crazy how much there is there. There's an awful lot of things there, a lot of evidence that could have been taken to court and still could be taken to court, and proving that all this is still affecting us to this day. Pretty much many people the world over, including the entire United States, have been dosed with high doses of radiation because of this, and it's still ongoing. They haven't yet fixed it. Not a lot of people in the alternate media have been covering this topic, and some people have been shunning it entirely. So we're going to be covering that. My friends Trinity and Crystal will be on with me very shortly here. Trinity's on now, and Crystal should be calling in very shortly. Hello, Trinity.
Hi everybody. It's been a long time.
Welcome back.
Thank you for having me today.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. I think this is going to be absolutely a great show. A great two-part show, and it's desperately needed. Nobody's really It's not that it's not being discussed. It's on the back burner, and it really is not supposed to be. This is something that we should talk about on a constant and regular basis because this isn't the only instance. Everybody thinks they look at the map and say, "Oh, Japan's too far. It'll never happen here." These kinds of instances are all over the planet simultaneously. So
yeah. And then, of course, we have the jet stream, which pulls all of that shit, stuff everywhere. Excuse me. So,
yeah, well, it does.
Crystal, are you in
it
yet?
does do that, but we really need to understand that this isn't, like I said, this isn't the first instance. We've been surrounded by this kind of stuff, radioactivity, the things that affect the water and the air. It's not just chemtrails. It's not just fluoridation anymore. This is something that mixed together is a very dangerous concoction. And we are constantly surrounded by it. We're breathing it. We're eating it. People don't want to discuss that. If you think that just the radiation from Fukushima, and then you think about the BP oil spill, we have a hell of a combination of what we're consumed with. So we have to take into consideration what our bodies are actually going through. So I think this is going to be great. I got a couple of things I definitely want to bring to the table. So thanks a lot for bringing me today.
Yes, absolutely. And Crystal being here for a second, I hit the wrong button in the wrong place. It's trying to bring her into my phone as opposed to bring her into Skype over here on the computer. Give me a second. I'm going to just.
Did you give her the call-in number?
I did. I'm gonna sign out of Skype on my phone to see if that will take care of the problem.
Okay.
If she's listening, I hope she'll know. I'm gonna text her in just a second. So yes, keep going because I'm gonna.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna keep discussing this until you're finished. So one of the things that I wanted to bring up was an article. It's from this year, actually, it's from this month, and it's scientists over 60 million killed by nuclear fallout, more than 120 million cancers from radioactive releases. Doesn't include millions more dead babies and fetuses. A professor says it's horrifying. This is a war crime, far greater in magnitude than any that has occurred in recorded human history. Now, even though that's the title, I don't think that that's actually truthful. We have a habit of thinking that anything new is the worst in history. We do that a lot. So it's not that it isn't horrifying and that it isn't causing major issues, especially medical issues for infants, newborns, and women that haven't even had babies yet, or the effect of them having babies in the future. But this is something that people have to honestly understand. Of course, we all have regular radiation that goes on.
I'm sorry, I'm not able to leave me a detailed message with what you need. I will try to get back to you.
Hang on, I got her.
Hi.
Oh, come on. Hang on 1 second.
I'm trying to pause that.
I'm going to call you actually through it in just a second because I got to bring you into the call with Trinity. 1 second here.
Okay.
To record your message, press 2.
And round.
Sorry about that.
Hundreds of... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are you still there? To disconnect.
Stop. Okay, alright, now we got this. I've never used it before. I didn't realize it came through like that. I thought maybe it went to the station as opposed to directly to my Skype. I should have asked about that. I apologize.
Hi, this is Crystal.
Oh, it went back to her voicemail again.
Leave me a detailed message with...
Okay, why don't you go ahead and get in contact with her on Facebook and let her know that she needs to pick up.
The tone.
Because all of this is being...
I know it is.
Recording. You may hang up or press 1 for more options.
Tim, you can go ahead and take care of that. I'll just keep talking so there's no dead air.
There we go. I found the right button.
Okay.
She knows. I'm in contact with her, but she didn't pick up. I think maybe she was trying to call in at the same time that I was calling her.
Uh-huh.
There we go. Oh, wait. Alright. I see how it works now. Alright, we got this. I feel like a fun person. Little hiccup here.
Hi.
Hello. How are you doing today, Crystal?
I'm so glad to hear from you.
Me too.
I'm doing great, thank you.
I apologize
How
for all
do
that,
you
folks.
today?
We had some interesting technical difficulties there. I wasn't sure how to bring her in.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, hi Crystal. How are you?
Hi, Trinity. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Good. Glad
Glad
to
to
meet you
meet you.
guys. Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay.
go ahead and finish up because we spent a lot of time on this.
Yes, absolutely. It's been interesting. So, yes, I would like to get the ball rolling on this. I mean, with all this stuff going on, with the twin towers being destroyed, and all the different theories going on around them, which don't necessarily always have a lot of evidence to back them up. That's why I think Dr. Judy Wood's research and a plethora of all these pictures and all kinds of stuff that she has looked through. So she has I think it's over 40,000 pictures. I think she has a whole bunch of witness testimony and many, 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 many hours of video analysis that she has done in order to show all this evidence of the idea that it's very possible that there was directed energy weapons on there. And I think it's almost conclusive with the amount of stuff that she's bringing forward. And it's another thing that a lot of alternative people, alternative radio hosts, and alternative media sources and personalities have covered a little bit of in the beginning, and then it's almost as if they're quote unquote handlers told them to back off. There was a lot of them that reversed their opinions. I've seen a really interesting video by a guy named, I don't know if you've ever heard of him, but his name is Andrew Johnson. He's out of the UK. He has a video on YouTube, and I have it posted on revisingreality.com on the show notes page. It's called The Taboo of Disclosure. If you scroll down and see that, he listed a whole bunch of people who have started with Judy Wood's work and then turned around on it and stopped doing it. And the guy who put out September Clues actually refused to even discuss it and was very rude about it. So I wonder what's going on there when she has such good information, and it's pretty much in the bag. I mean, she spent years doing this ever since it happened. I was watching an interview with her, and she was basically like, well, when I first saw it, I was like, she was watching it within her faculty lounge, and she was, they were sitting there September 11, 2001, and they're watching this happen in real time, and she's like, something is wrong here. And other people in the room did not see it. They didn't, they just accepted what was supposed to be going on, and they're watching this event unfold in real time, and she's saying there's something wrong here. So she's been studying this since it happened. And then, of course, now we have Plume-Gate, which is also another massive problem at the world, because, I mean, you look at, 9/11, it's spawned a whole bunch of wars. The United States has spent trillions of dollars fighting them supposedly to fight these Al-Qaeda who did this attack. But I really doubt that Al-Qaeda has the ability to use directed energy weapons. Not to mention that, it's all over the place that, Al-Qaeda is funded and supported by the United States government and was created by the United States government to begin with to fight the Russians in the 80s and 70s. So there's, obviously that kind of stuff goes in the background. I don't necessarily even want to address who did it because, there's a lot of speculation on that, whatever. Tonight's focus is more about, what actually happened and what can be proven. And Dr. Judy Wood's research is extremely, I don't even know how to put it. She basically has it pinned down with all the random cars exploding all over the place right around the towers. I mean and then the entire building went up in smoke, and you can never find. There's only one, and it was in the basement. There's only one out of 40,000 plus filing cabinets that were supposed to be in this tower, in the twin towers, both of them. There was only one found, and it was a Ben and Jerry's ice cream one. It was in the basement of Ben and Jerry's, and at the very basement of the towers. It was the only one that survived, and it was completely compacted and destroyed. And also, this ties into John Hutchinson's work. He's the guy who does those really crazy experiments. A lot of people don't like, he's maligned a lot and said, called a quack or whatever. But he has all kinds of video evidence and all kinds of experiments, and he's actually recreated the Philadelphia experiment within his laboratory. So he's used electrical and effects. He's used frequency effects to be able to cause these things to happen. He's used basically what would be considered directed energy to cause massive, how shall I say this, steel beams bending, copper pipes, solid copper bending, like in a long tube form. And this is, if you go to Dr. Judy Wood's site, you can find she has a page, and I have it linked directly on the site as well, with a whole bunch of pictures of beams, steel beams from that was found in the wreckage of the Twin Towers that were bent and twisted as if somebody came along, some giant came along and just bent them with their hands, like crazy shapes. This stuff, it wasn't bent in the collapse. In other words, it wasn't like broken. And then, of course, if you watch the videos, I actually posted a couple of pictures on my site of the stills of these giant. There was a couple of people who survived in one corner of the towers. I think it was it might have been Tower 2. And there's this massive structure of steel support beams, and it has to be at least 750 tall by comparison to the rest of the buildings around it, because it was well over Building 7, and this was before Building 7 collapsed. If you go and watch these videos, you can actually watch it disappear before your very eyes and turn into dust. These things were structured. These things, after the rest of the tower came down, these things were still standing. So you're talking, it's supporting on its own, and we're talking steel beams, and these are some of the largest steel beams ever created by mankind. They're the most structurally sound ones, and they just literally disappear before your eyes. They crumble into nothing. I encourage you to go and check this out. There's no way for that to happen within the normal realms of our physical reality, within the normal accepted realms of our scientific reality. Whenever you look at the physical laws of nature, it's just not possible. And it's also not possible to fit 110-story buildings into basically what amounts to the lobby of these buildings, which can't be more than 3 or 4 stories tall. And that's it. Like there's no more rubble. It completely dustifies, completely, like the entire building. That is not possible within the normal realms of physics. There has to be some other force at play here. And then of course there's the hurricane that was off the coast, and that also was very strange, because right on September 11th it did a 90-degree turn and started heading up the coast to Newfoundland because it was right off the coast of wasn't talked about. It hit Bermuda, or it hit Bermuda and Bahamas, and then it went straight up the coast, and it was basically really close to New York City. Wasn't talked about at all. When this event happened, within those couple of hours, it completely veered off course and changed direction. You would have to have some kind of massive electrical and EMF interference in order to cause that, if you understand the electric universe theory a little bit and how it affects our weather. So you have some kind of massive interference that causes this hurricane to do basically a right-hand turn and then start to go the other direction. It's crazy, the stuff that wasn't talked about and isn't really seen or put forth either by the alternative media or the mainstream media. And I think there's something there. There's something very real staring us in the face that should be alerting us to the fact that the alternative media, maybe as much as we tend to trust it, is not what it appears to be. At least not all of them. There's always going to be people who, like us, are passionate and actually want to find the real truth. But a lot of the big names, I would argue, at least some of the big names, are not covering some of the most important and most evidence-rich topics out there. A lot of them are covering a lot of things that, maybe they have some relevance, but they're not something you can prove in the court of law. And Plume-Gate and Dr. Judy Wood's evidence would be admissible. And that is something that, needs to be understood. And I will defer to somebody else now.
I thought I did look into her stuff right before we had this discussion. I looked at a lot of the information that she had, and I thought that it was fantastic. And when you get into evidence where something is clear as things vaporizing, not burning, the one fascinating thing that I heard her say was, why wasn't everybody on fire? And it never really dawned on me. Because one, there's not many of us that are familiar with how things collapse. We don't all get to watch or participate in demolitions and things like that. We don't know how those things work. Or at least, most people do not. So seeing something like that, and then people taking that as an extremely valid possibility that the planes would have caused something like that, it never dawned on me that everybody wasn't on fire. There wasn't really just this generalized, the way that, an explosion would actually work. But that I think they said one cabinet survived. Now, paper survived, and they were laying right there on the ground next to cars that were on fire.
Yep.
And
there's paper
that stuff
everywhere.
does not make any kind of sense. I think I sent you the link to it the other day, but I wrote a paper back in 2011 about a book that came out by a man by the name of John McPhee. And he wrote a bunch of books. I'm going to read just a little bit of what he does. But he actually mentioned in the late 80s of the possibility of a nuclear device being very easy to be used on literally the World Trade Center. So I thought it was really weird that I found something like that and nobody discussed it. Nobody in the 9/11 research world, I never heard that before. And I said, well, how could that possibly, just be possible? A lot of people go and subscribe to the possibility that the entire event, and it's controversial, but that the entire event was a demonstration of the type of weaponry we have. It was a worldwide display of the power. Now, whoever implemented this, whoever worked this whole thing out, because you know what, the whole inside job thing, I subscribe to it, but I don't really know who at this point. I can name a couple of people I think that would be part of it by ignoring it. But all in all, if this was a display, the same way if you built a plane and you had a bunch of people come out and watch it, see it doing what it's supposed to do. So this was a worldwide wake-up call. So Theodore Taylor was one of the most brilliant engineers of the nuclear age. But in his later years, he became concerned with the possibility of an individual being able to construct a weapon of mass destruction on their own. McPhee tours American nuclear institutions with Taylor and shows us how close we are to terrorist attacks employing homemade nuclear weaponry. Now, John McAfee is a Pulitzer Prize winner. He wrote a book called The Curve of Binding Energy, and they were both nominated for National Book Awards in the category of science. So this isn't just like some run-of-the-mill kind of guy. Now, he also miniaturized the atomic bomb and also designed the largest yield fission bomb that has ever been exploded. Subsequently, he led a scientific effort to build a nuclear-powered spaceship. Don't ask me what that means. But he later became convinced that weapons-grade uranium and plutonium are alarmingly available to anyone who might wish to build a homemade bomb. Now, I don't think that these were just a bunch of guys who got a bunch of stuff together, mixed it up, and this is how it happened. This had to be a very concerted effort to fool as many people as humanly possible, and it worked. Not only did it cause fear, it caused confusion on science, how science works. And even though thousands upon thousands of people in the scientific community are saying, this isn't real, it can't be. Everything that happened that day doesn't connect with anything we've taught and anything we've learned. The whole incident was just what they would consider an anomaly. So we have to put into play that everything that she came up with, whether it being a weapon coming from a particular satellite, whether it comes from anything else, the most fascinating thing that she said was, why wasn't everybody on fire? Like, the people that were running that were consumed with that smoke should have died from smoke inhalation, which, again, that didn't dawn on me. You know what I mean? Yeah. If this came from that, everybody should have just been choking on the smoke, the same way if there was smoke in your house and you were standing and not lying down. These people were covered from head to toe and didn't have severe smoke inhalation from fire.
Absolutely.
So, that book came out in the 80s, and it was discussed. They had a television interview and a panel meeting to say, we need to pay attention to this. There's stuff that we can do. There's people that can get it. We have the power to do this at any point in time. Anybody who can come up with these two ingredients can do anything. And they would most likely do it in the World Trade Center. And this came out at least 15 years before it actually happened on 9/11.
And then there's like what you were saying about the fire. Everybody should have been on fire. If you look at the Dubai fire that was very recent, that structure did not come down. It was a massive steel structure, skyscraper, and the thing catches on fire. And there's flames everywhere.
It burned. It
Yeah,
burned
it
for
literally
hours
burned.
and hours and hours.
But if you
and
watch
nothing happened.
if you watch the Twin Towers though, there was no real visible fire except for on the upper floors. That was it. If you look at there's a lot of pictures. There's a Chinese fire, and you can see that. I mean, there's been hundreds. There's been at least 119. I think it was. I researched this a while ago. But there was at least, at that point, there was at least 119 steel structure skyscraper fires in the history of the world, right? And none of them came down, and pretty much all of them were repaired and put back into, service. So why is it that on 9/11 there was these 3 towers, steel structure towers, that all came down? And of course, if you look at the rest of the buildings, they were all devastated. The entire complex was devastated, and there's all this heavy clouds of how do you even put it? It's not doesn't look like smoke. It's all this heavy. It almost looks like concrete. Yes, that's how Judy Wood put it. It's a lather of almost concrete, like just peeling off of these buildings, and it's peeling off in a very strange way. If you watch the video, like it's not just coming off like normal smoke, the way that the wind direction of the day that was coming. It's actually like almost like it's being sucked up into a vortex and then sent across the city. Very, very strange. Like there's so many things that were going on there. And then, like you said, the paper, like all the paper survived. They actually gave the Ben & Jerry's ice cream people, when they found that
cabinet,
one cabinet, the only cabinet that survived, which out of 40,000, there had to, where did they all go, right? Well, this one cabinet had the money in it, and they gave it back to Ben & Jerry's. Like they had money in that cabinet, and it was, whatever they had, saved up in there or whatever, and they give it back to them at the end of the thing. After they pulled it out of the wreckage. And it's the only one that survived. And you can find videos of that from Dr. Judy Wood as well. I mean, it's a lot of visual evidence, so I can't really put it on in a radio format. But like I said, if you go to my website, you can find the YouTube videos, and you can find like pictures and links to a bunch of pictures by Judy Wood. On the Facebook page for Revising Reality, I also posted a little while back, if you scroll down the links, there is... Judy Wood put a Facebook post of like 500 plus pictures, and it's only a small amount of the crazy amount of stuff that she has collected and analyzed on her own about this on this subject. And there's just so many things there that you can see, and once you start looking at it and you start seeing it for yourself, it's like you're like, wow, there's something to this, because the evidence is overwhelming.
Did you hear that guy? I can't remember his name right now, but he said not only did not one building in recorded history ever come down demolition style from burning, but imagine the odds of 3 of them happening on the same day within hours of each other. They were like, so if it never happened before, but all of a sudden, coincidentally, of course, 3 buildings that have never, not one building in history, recorded in history ever, came down like that from a fire. But how did 3, one day, next to each other, within hours of each other, do the impossible, something that science has taught would never happen, that it was an impossibility, it just doesn't happen that way. It was like the odds change into the trillions, the quadrillions, of that ever happening. So people really have to take that into consideration. Even if you think that the government did it, or they didn't do it, or somebody knew or they didn't know, just look at that one thing. 3 buildings, one day, within hours of each other, doing a demolition style pancake drop in front of millions of people that I'm saying that watched it. And when you watch it so many times, you just see it over and over again. It terrifies you. And when you're in a state of fear like that, it's really hard for your brain to get really analytical.
Absolutely.
It's the same way as you watching a scary movie and you want the woman that has the high heels running in the woods, you want her to get away. But you're not trying to think, well, she has a 4-inch heel, and if she just, goes down in this direction and, kind of leans toward the right, she might get away. We're not thinking that way. We don't do that when we're in fear. So now that we've had all of this time and so many people, more and more and more people, and I've talked to people from Texas, here in Missouri, and most people don't know that a 3rd building fell. And I know in New York they started a campaign. I think it was Truth for Change, started buying billboards and saying, "Remember, a third building fell," because they were. I mean, most people were surprised. Nobody knows. Everybody thinks 2 buildings fell, that not a third.
Yep. And that's interesting because there was the guy, who was in there. I can't remember his name. He was that black guy who came out and saying, "Hey, I heard explosions and I was inside the building." Now, like I said, like we were discussing, like there's no really evidence for any explosives having been detonated on that thing. Although it wouldn't surprise me if they used a small amount of them to like soften it up, perhaps. But he was adamant about, like, there was something amiss there, and then the whole building came down around him, and he managed to survive. Like, he barely got out before the rest of it came down. And then he ended up getting killed.
About the senior janitor at the World Trade Center?
I don't know. He was in World Trade Center 7. I can't remember his name. I know his face. Like, every time I see his face, I know who it was.
And you said there were no fires in the building?
No, there was no fires in the building, and the whole thing came down.
Right.
Yeah, so it's definitely something that people have to look into. I know that there's a huge debate, especially here in the United States. In other countries, you look at any information from any other publication that's not run by the CIA, by the way, around the world, they pretty much got it figured out. They're the ones that are like, are these people serious? Are they really having a discussion, a debate about 3 buildings falling down like that? And one had one fire on one of the top floors. A plane didn't hit it. Gasoline coming from, and people really do forget how far Building 7 was from the Twin Towers. Lived in New York all of my life. That was not right next door.
Barry Jennings.
Right next door.
Barry Jennings. That was his name. That's his name, yes. I just looked him up really fast in the background because I was very curious. I remember, like I said, I remember his face. And as soon as I Googled it and I figured it out, well, I didn't Google it. I used start page, but Barry Jennings came up finally, because when I did the first search, it didn't come up for anything. So a lot of people, would have a question of, like, what is a directed energy weapon? How in the world is it even possible? I mean, it's been coming out a lot over the years about, like, microwave cannons mounted on, like, say, Humvees that would be used for crowd control. That's an interesting topic, but we're talking about something much bigger than that, or at the very least used in a much more nefarious way, obviously, to kill many, 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 many people. The interesting thing to think about is, like, how in the world is such a thing powered? How in the world is such a thing mounted? Nikola Tesla, as I covered in, I think it was the last show, I talked a bit about, Mark Passio was covering Dr. Judy Woods, and he was linking it to Tesla. And Tesla had this device called it was an oscillator. It was a magnetic mechanical oscillator, and it basically used selective taps and caused a reverberation and a change in frequency within whatever it was attached to. And he actually used it experimentally, and he didn't hurt anybody. But if he would have kept on for 10 minutes more, he attached it to this skyscraper that was being built in Manhattan. And after a little while, the whole thing started shaking, and the workers started coming off the building thinking that there was how should I put this, an earthquake. So he pulled it off, like, he's like, if I would have laid on 10 minutes more, he's like, the whole building would have came down. He's like, I could have laid that whole building flat in the ground. And he told this to reporters. He also said that you could bring down the Brooklyn Bridge with that device in less than an hour. And he also said that he could take down the Empire State Building. What he did say about the Empire State Building, that is that if you did such a thing to a steel-structured skyscraper with a concrete outer shell, that the entire outer shell would be hurled off in a cloud of dust, and that the whole inner workings of the skyscraper would come all the way down in a flat area, right down into its footprint. This is very important, because it might not even have been... it's very possible there was multiple things going on at this point, because the way that the building came down and the way that everything was disintegrated speaks to even more powerful weaponry as well. But I think that one of the basic things that they used on this was they probably planted these devices on the base of the skyscraper within the steel structure to do the main process. The other thing that Mark Passio had brought up was Tesla's scalar waves, which you can turn into basically a movable bubble, if you will, by interferometry, which means that you intersect two of the waves from two different locations, and then you can move that across the planet at will, and then you can also explode it. You can detonate it, and it would disintegrate everything within that area. So in other words, if they used Tesla's device on it, but they didn't think it would quite be enough, then they could use this scalar wave interferometry to take down the rest of it. And because it would be a violent explosion, they wouldn't even need to use that much energy to just detonate whatever else was left there or disintegrate it. So what if, because I don't think that it would have done quite, if you watch those beams that were sticking up straight in the air as the rest of the tower collapsed and this was the only thing left. You see this thing disintegrate. What if they used Tesla's quote-unquote death ray, which is really what, this thing was. But the technical term for it is the scalar waves, to finish off the buildings, to make sure that everything came down so that nobody would have anything to really look at to try to compare it to anything else, to try to say, well, this is very strange. They didn't want that happening. They wanted it to look like a controlled demolition, so therefore they could leave no trace behind of this. And since they control the media and they control the alternative media, then, or at least the big names anyhow, they did everything in their power to make it look as if it could have been a controlled demolition, or at the very least it just looked like a skyscraper fall, depending on if you fell on the mainstream in the official story, or if you decided to go with the inside job story that we're usually told, with controlled demolition or thermite, which there really isn't very much evidence for. Some people bring up, like, microscopically there was all these little steel granules, and iron granules found within the leftovers of the tower, all the dust and whatnot. That is actually a byproduct of these weapons' use, because of how it affects it on the molecular level. The people jumping from the building were trying to escape this energy field that they were being enveloped in, and that's what was causing the cars to explode. Because it was causing, you have gasoline and you have batteries, which are both sealed things that have explosive power, and they're being affected by this field that's all around it. And yet, like, you see all this paper. The paper wasn't even burnt. It wasn't touched. It's just flying around. There was a guy who was on ground level, and he was a reporter, and he was an experienced reporter, and he had been in, I think he said he was been in wartime. His interview is in one of the videos I have posted in Revising Reality today with Judy Woods, and what he says basically is, he was on the ground, when this thing started collapsing, and he saw the dust cloud. He's like, I've never run. He said, I've never run from anything. He's like, I've been in very dangerous situations as a reporter before. He's like, but when that thing came down and I saw that massive cloud of dust heading my way, he said, just something in his head told him he had to run. So he started running, and he couldn't beat the cloud out. What happened when it hit him? He's like, I flew, and he's like, the only reason he know how far he flew, because he flew an entire block, and he lost his glasses, he lost pretty much everything, he lost his phone, but the only thing he was able to hold on to was the cameras. So he managed to keep the footage and keep the cameras. But when he, got up and dusted himself off, he was like, this cloud, he said, it had a weight to it, like a massive amount of weight and force when it hit him. And it blew him, like a block back. Now, the only reason he knew that it blew him a block back was because he went back later on and visited the site again to see, what happened. He went back to the street and he found where he had ended up, and he found where he was running whenever, like, he saw the landmark just before the cloud of dust had hit him. So he found out where he was and where relation to where he ended up, and he was like, this cloud of dust, which, if it was just smoke, it wouldn't have any weight to it. It was not just smoke. It was the whole entire weight of it was the building itself peeling off, and coming down around it. And it wasn't just the building. It would have been, made up of all the filing cabinets that were missing, all the steel that, was completely disintegrated, and all that stuff, and the concrete and the windows. Like, all the windows are missing. There's no broken glass whatsoever. That is another thing that Judy Wood brings up. Like, there was no broken glass found. It's extremely strange. And the bodies. Very few bodies were recovered. which is another thing. Where did these people go? They found their clothes, much like the how shall I put this? Much like the paper. The clothes were mostly untouched. They were mostly intact, but the bodies were gone. Something had to have happened to those bodies. If you're thinking about, like, say the Tesla's oscillator device would have affected the entire building, but it probably wouldn't have necessarily affected or transferred to the people, who were just standing, like, in some of the pieces or whatever, unless they were somehow physically attached to, the structure itself. They probably would not have been affected as much by, that particular device. So therefore, the idea that scalar waves and something more exotic was used at that point of time, it boggles the mind, because something else had to have happened in order to, completely disintegrate the bodies. And that is something that I don't think I've heard pretty much anybody ever bring up. Judy Wood brings it up, but, pretty much nobody talks about that. There was so many different things that happened within this, event that are absolutely and totally, scary. Because if you think about the like you said, Trinity, the power, that these people were basically putting forth to the world that they had, which also ties into Mark Passio's research, which I want to get into probably on the next show, because we're going to go into Plume-Gate here soon, but on this one. But what Mark Passio brought up, as he said, was 9/11 was a cult ritual that was done on the face of humanity within our collective unconscious to sacrifice and destroy the sacred feminine. And because the sacred feminine principle is care. If people no longer care, then they are no longer trying to search for answers. They are put in fear mode. They're put in anger mode. And then if you're told who did this within minutes or hours, then, which is exactly what happened, by the mainstream media, because there's no forensic, trying to sort this out. They just said, oh, it was Osama bin Laden, it was Al Qaeda. That was the story that was given right away, like right, exactly right as this thing was going down. They already said they knew who did it. So these planes hit this building. These buildings come down, and each of the plane numbers, which I don't have that information on hand directly right now, which I said I will. Like I said, I will try to get that in next week. But like Mark Passio says, like each of the buildings and each of the planes hit them, all the numbers adding up makes esoteric significance. Because these people who, are at the very top of the entire world, we're not talking about the Bushes or the Rockefellers. We're talking about the people in the shadows who might have been responsible for this, who would be the only ones who had the power and the know-how and the ability to pull this off and keep it so secret. And on top of all of that, they not only did they keep it secret and whatnot, but they used extremely advanced exotic technology, at least advanced and exotic technology to us and to our perspective as being people who have been exposed to this dogmatic science, gravity-based. There is no free energy or anything whatsoever, in the cosmos. It's all just dark matter and whatever. Like they don't, all of this separation that puts forth, as opposed to the electric universe, which suggests that we are all connected, and which ties into our brains being electric, and I covered in the last show, our DNA conducts electricity. And healthy DNA conducts more electricity than unhealthy DNA, and how the body repairs itself is by increasing the electrical connectivity within our DNA. Which ties directly into the electric universe. It's very interesting to see like the microcosm versus the macrocosm and how it all fits together. We are connected at a pulse rate because the electric force is an instantaneous force. So we are connected instantaneously to the galactic center, to the center of the universe, to our sun, and then to each other at all times, and to the planet. And this power flows through us. So like, it is outside of our realm of understanding, because we're told all the time that it's a gravity-based universe, and that's the major power, even though that is an infinitesimally weak force compared to the electric force. Which you can go to thunderbolts.info and learn an awful lot about that. I covered a lot about that in the last two shows. I was trying to build up to this topic. But the idea, that we are put forth in the public consciousness through our rigorous public indoctrination system is that, there is no such thing as free energy. There is no such thing as anything outside of our experience. Science knows everything, and that nothing's connected, right? We're all separate. We're all just isolated islands within the universe, whether that we be people or planets or so-called nuclear-powered stars, etc., etc. As opposed, so it's outside of our realm of reference to even look for the idea that there could have been some kind of alternative power behind the destruction of these towers. And that's something that most people, like I said, we're being indoctrinated to not even consider the possibility that such thing could be, made happen. That such thing could even be possible. It's something that people should understand. But I got out of, where I was going with the dark occult ritual. Like, all the numbers of the planes hit each individual building and the Pentagon, and the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, well, quote-unquote plane. All these things, they had esoteric significance to them, and the two towers represented the pillars within Freemasonry of, I can't even remember how to pronounce them. I will have to look into it before. But anyway, they represented esoteric significance. All the towers that went down in the square and the Pentagon all represented certain things within the consciousness of humankind. And by bringing those down, they were sacrificing our sacred feminine nature of care, which put us right into fear and anger mode, so that when they told us who did it, that we were ready to just jump on board the bandwagon, be all united, and forget all our political differences for a couple of months, and just let's go kill people in some other place in the country, because apparently 19 guys with, box cutters could outwit the most technologically advanced, and biggest military power on the face of the planet. I mean, like I said, being outwitted by these guys who came from herding goats in Afghanistan in some desert, hole. It's incomprehensible to attempt to believe such a thing. I would say, but yet they made us do it, and they made us do it because, like I said, the indoctrination system. And then you got to understand, if they are able to pull all of this off, you're talking about powers that are beyond our comprehension, who have already been plugged in for how many years. We're talking probably at the most millions, but at the very least thousands of years, plugged into our entire world and helped set up our entire world the way it is now, including the United States, whether or not you wanted to try to believe that the United States is somewhat different or was founded somewhat different. It was designed to happen the way that it did. They might have had some rough times wresting control because the people here were very free-spirited, and that might have backfired on them a little bit, but eventually they did manage to get the control, and their holding is a corporation now, and they're the ones who set up these towers to look like they did in order to represent these esoteric principles in preparation for this event years and years and years ago, before the towers were even built. That is how far back their planning goes. That's how far back they were prepared to see this through. That they had the ability to look forward in the future and say, okay, well, if we did this at this time, then we would have the outcome that we want and have the control that we want and be able to wrest even more power in the public consciousness. Because all this is based on the fact that our individual consciousnesses create the things that we subliminally think. So if our human creative subconsciousnesses create reality, and everybody together co-creates reality together, then the only way that they can outwit natural law and not be in trouble for doing such things, the only way that they can do that is to cause us to get on board with what they're doing in unknowingness. Because if we knew, then we would never do it. But because they use our subconsciousness against us and our creative powers against us, then they guide us in the direction they want us to go. And this entire thing was about that. And like I said, it was been planned for many, 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 many years. They planned even the building of those towers to represent these things, and then they blew them up in front of us all. And that is you have to understand that these people have, they pull the strings as this happens, you know what I mean? And they don't know everything, but they attempt to guide us in the direction they go, and they have such good systems set up to keep us isolated and afraid and not understanding the true nature of reality. So therefore, they have this kind of power, and they can freely do it as it goes. I do think it's crumbling, because if you see now, it's almost obvious that, the political system is a joke. I think if we do get to this presidential election, it's probably going to be one of the last ones, because it's like the interest is waning. Like more and more people are starting to wake up and see this for what it is, and they're going, well, now we got to find a different solution. But that, it quintessentially is what was going on 9/11. there's a lot more stuff to this. And like I said, I want to go into it a little more deeply in the next show. But I think especially in the next hour here, I want to get into what Crystal has to say. A lot of stuff she's been helping me track down, a lot of stuff on the FOIA documents, Freedom of Information Act documents from the NRC and Plume-Gate. There's an awful lot of stuff on that and the radiation that's affecting us all, and the different disasters that are ongoing and have already happened within the United States that were completely downplayed, and they affected us all because we have all been dosed with high doses of radiation for many, 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 many years, almost an entire century since they started detonating these things. If you really think these things are isolated events, like I said, just look at the jet stream. If that stuff even gets close to the jet stream, it will take off and go everywhere. Everywhere. So we've all been dosed by this for many years, and we don't even know it. And they've been keeping it, hush hush and under wrap. Even more so than Judy Wood's book, because there's been a couple people, like I said, that started on that. Very few people have even tried to cover what Patrick Henry had to say when he wrote an entire book, 500 plus pages of covering these Freedom of Information Act documents that prove that the government, our government, the United States anyway. I don't like to say our because it's not mine. I don't care about it, but they knew that this was going to happen, and there is a lot of evidence to suggest that they caused it on purpose, and I want to get into that too in the next hour. So before, I think we have a few minutes left before the break. Crystal, do you want to start warming us up for that?
Yeah, I have read the majority of the book you just mentioned, Something Wickedness Like Comes, the story of Plume-Gate, in the last couple of days, and I wanted to read a bit from that. I also want to bring up, when you mentioned just a few minutes ago about the two pillars, Boaz and Joaquin.
Oh, yes.
And how they symbolize how the Twin Towers were used, symbolically in this ritual. I think you were right on point with that. And the suppression of free energy and anti-gravity technology that I come to find out that Eastern European and Russian universities include, a lot of Tesla's work in their universities, right? However, the United States does not. So it makes me wonder, why the suppression of this information that could be helpful to us as a universe? Why would you suppress information that we could use to better ourselves
and free ourselves? I mean, if you look at how energy cost controls our lives and how much oil has to do with our lives right now. I mean, Tesla was trying to do interesting things with that, and if he would have been successful, not only can you power the whole Earth and power individual cars and vehicles, whatever, with this. Even if you just didn't even want anti-gravity, you could even just run, normal tires and put an electric receiver in there and an electric motor in there, and you could run it at all times without ever having to recharge. The batteries would probably just be for emergencies in case the grid went down or something or not. But the amount of control that they have over the energy, which is insane if you think about it, and it just stems all the way back before Nazi Germany. With the IG Farben, you can go into that, and their involvement with the American companies, like DuPont and whatnot, and they pretended that they were enemies, but they were really funding each other behind the scenes, and all that stuff. I mean, it's crazy how much is being hidden from the public consciousness, and it's so, the control system is so advanced here. Like you said, in Russia and other places in the world, they actually talk about this kind of stuff and put it in their curriculum, in their own indoctrination, because they're not using this kind of stuff either. So there's got to be some sort of indoctrination going on there, but they're more open about talking about it, about discussing it, which is, better than the United States. But obviously, they're still voting on their own leaders instead of leading themselves as human beings, which is ultimately where we need to end up going.
I agree. I think that would be the best solution, is for us to, create a freer society that uses this technology that's been suppressed. We have all the information in front of us. We have the internet, which is like the best place to go to find the information when you're looking for resources and documents. And, I spend a great deal of time online researching information that I don't often get to talk about. However, it's there for anyone who's willing to do the work.
Absolutely. So we're going to go for a quick break here. Go ahead and go on mute there, Crystal, and we'll be back after the break with a whole bunch more stuff on Plume-Gate. Thank you very much.
We'll be right back after this message.
Who owns you? If you're not in control, then someone else is. Join me, Ivy West, for Voices on the Wind, Saturday from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern in Studio A. I discuss government, health, metaphysics, suppressed science, universal mysteries, little-known incredible facts, alternative energies, and even more than you can imagine. Won't you join us on Revolution Radio Saturdays from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern for Voices on the Wind with me, Ivy West.
There are lives in the balance, people under fire, children at the cannons.
Because if your head's in the sand, your tail is a target.
There needs some more speed records in this day and age. You need coverage.
Coverage? Oh, you mean them little root weevils that crawl around popping off cameras in your face?
Those root weevils write history.
Many of you know that quote by Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Well, you can, and Event Horizons will give you those truths. So when you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore from that memorable senior network, you'll know just what to do. We will draw you in and become your news addiction at Event Horizons. Join us Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time at freedomslips.com and Revolution Radio. Our world team members are Dennis Fetcho, John Ilias, David Dunger, Halakas MD, Melanie Richton, Jim Mars, Paula Harris, John Trello, Maria Payan, Christopher Husser, DODDS, Jonathan Orchard, and me, your anchor, Dr. Robin Falco.
If you decide not to volunteer, it will not be held against you in any way.
Sounds dangerous.
It is very dangerous.
Count me in.
That's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps.
There is no denying the world is awakening. We see it in the global uprisings and demonstrations of the people around the planet and the new way of thinking and living that is arising naturally within each one of us and our communities. I have been a major player in this global shift and movement for over 20 years and have helped tens of thousands of people around the world change their lives and find their voice in order to help create the paradigm change we so desperately need. Join me here at Revolution Radio on the Just Bernard Show every Tuesday at noon Eastern Time for 2 hours of powerful interviews and discussion with some of the most influential visionaries of consciousness, alternative media, and suppressed knowledge. We promise to reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience.
Listen in on Mondays, 8 Eastern Time on Revolution Radio for Journeys with JP. With a variety of guests, each giving their perspective on their journey into the now. Join me and my guests, Mondays, 8 p.m. Eastern on Revolution Radio Studio B.
Don't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another?
Extra big ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase. I'm sorry you're having
Come
trouble.
on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What are we doing live? It goes in eternity.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Welcome back, everyone. Good to have you on board. We're getting the second hour here. We're going to go into, Plume-Gate, because we have a lot of stuff to go with there. Hello, Crystal. How are you doing again?
I'm good. Thank you so much. Like I was saying earlier, we have all this information at our fingertips. All it takes is the effort to look and to discover and promote it out there to other people who are open-minded enough to catch on, and by word of mouth, the truth can spread like a wildfire. But if we don't, take the time and engage in meaningful conversation with one another, then we're still going to be stuck where we've been for the last 100 years, really getting nowhere.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what they want. They don't want us to progress because they want controlled progress. They want to bring us slowly into this thing, and then so that they can keep it all under wraps and under control, so that nobody knows, what's really going on and how to take advantage of it for themselves. But I think that plan is failing rapidly because the internet is just literally exploding, and people are still curious. They haven't been able to kill curiosity, and I think that's one of the things that they really wanted to do.
I agree. That's one of the things about keeping an open, childlike mind full of curiosity and wonder about the world and what's going on around you. And not allowing other people to take you off of your own personal path in the pursuit of, truth and justice. I've found, as I've grown or evolved in my own research, that the more I spend time researching, the better I feel, that I have some sort of control over what kind of information I take in. I can kind of sort out the information and from disinformation and lies to truth and what makes sense to me personally.
Absolutely. I find the same thing. As a human being, like I just keep continuing to, develop and grow and try to continue to research and learn new things. And you have to be able to put down any past beliefs you may hold. And I think I've talked about that a couple of other times on this show, quite a bit about the idea of beliefs and how much power they hold in our minds and how much power they hold over our creative subconscious to keep us locked away from thinking of anything else other than what we already believe. Because technically the word belief really only means accept without question. Many times that's what people's beliefs are. I'm not going to say that some people use the word belief to talk about other things like something they've researched, but a lot of times, like the general populace, belief is just something that they believe, and that's what they believe, and that's it. They don't, want to question it or test it or prove it or try to understand it, whether or not it could be true or false, or that there might be other possibilities. And that is something that, as human beings, we need to do. We need to start deconstructing our belief systems, because belief systems are what causes wars. It's what religion is based upon, in order to help control people's minds. It's part of the entire. It's part of the entire system. It's a very important part of the entire system. It's very sad that it is so prevalent, so widespread, and most people don't even realize what they are and what power they hold over us and what power they hold over over the earth and the etheric planes that surround it, and how much noise that we generate as human beings who don't know what's really going on or what anything about reality. It dominates what's going on, which makes all of this possible. All of the control system. The only reason it can work is because they spent so much time building this planet up to be what it is. What it was directly after 9/11 is what they really wanted. There was only a few people looking for truth. I mean, there was a growing movement then. I think that the 9/11 incident, because people hadn't been quenched they hadn't been destroyed as far as their curiosity hadn't been completely eliminated. With the curiosity not completely eliminated, that's when they started. That's another reason why there's so much in the alternative movement. There's why there's so much controlled opposition going on, because they don't want people to question it. So therefore, if they're going to question it, they want to control which direction they look. They want they want to control which direction they're thinking. They don't want them to know what's really going on behind the scenes, because if we did know, then we could stop it. And that's one of the major important things that's going on, behind the scenes as a race, as a species. We are all controlled, and we're all pushed into these things. And we think that when we're defending our beliefs, we are doing that out of a very important part of ourselves, when really it's designed that way. I mean, it's one thing to test and prove something and say that you want to keep it, even if it's not necessarily something that really benefits you. But if you think it does, you can keep it. Whatever, that's your personal choice. But I just implore that people start to look into these things and testing and proving them for yourselves. It's the Greek concept of the Greek word gnosis. It simply means to know, to understand. And without that, we don't have the ability to say that we actually understand our own beliefs. That we actually understand them for what they truly are, and how much they mean to us, if we don't actually look into them very deeply. So let's start getting into Plume-Gate here, because all that stuff was basically a run-up into it, which is great. A very good basis. Do you want me to play that video now, or you want me to wait a little bit?
If you could, I'd appreciate it if you would. Kindly, thank you.
Calling in for Christina Consolo, aka Rad Chick. And some of you may know me, some of you may not, but before I get started, I want to thank Rad Chick for this opportunity. And it is both an honor and a pleasure, because I realize how much time and energy is devoted to a radio show and building it up and making it your own. And so to turn that over to someone for an hour, that's like letting them take your kid out to the movies that night, right? So hopefully I do Christina Radchick proud today. And what we're going to discuss today is a very controversial subject, and that is the NRC Freedom of Information Act documents pertaining to the Fukushima meltdowns. Now, I'm not going to be discussing the meltdowns themselves. A lot of people have spoken of that, and that's out and in the open to some degree. But what I will cover is the orchestrated cover-up that is proven inside of these documents, and you really get a broad feel for just how these, like if you go back to the BP oil spill and you guys look into that, you know there was a no-fly zone and the blackout, and the mainstream media gave their version of the story. Same kind of thing happened with the cover-up of the radioactive plume and cloud from the Fukushima meltdowns. And so quickly I want to brief over, I took some notes last night. I said to myself, what have I learned from these documents from reading so many thousands of pages? What is it I would want to get across to Radchick's audience while I have this opportunity? So let me briefly go over what I have learned from these documents pertaining to not just the cover-up now, because there's a lot of other interesting information you can glean from reading through the Freedom of Information Act documents. Now, one of the important things early on, I realized that they were suppressing and covering up, but that you could read in these documents a lot of detail about just the extent of the damage at Fukushima, how serious it was, the catastrophe, and in fact, the Japanese forces' inability to respond quickly and effectively. Okay, and that's something they don't want you to know about nuclear power, that when a big one happens like Fukushima, you know, sometimes the rads are so high or the entryway is blocked due to debris, you can't even access the plant to begin to rectify the situation. So that's a serious concern that's revealed in the documents, and it's much suppressed by the NRC and the authorities here in the United States. And that's just briefly to cover that. We'll come back to that into more detail. Secondly, obviously the cover-up. Okay, when you look in these documents, you see just who all was involved, and it's a very broad involvement. I'll read you quickly some agencies involved, and indeed, it's at first when I got into the documents, I said, well, this is a United States cover-up, but it's more than that. It was global because it involves obviously IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. You'll have to have like WHO, the World Health Organization, downplaying the results of these catastrophes. So quickly, obviously NRC, Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the DOE, the EPA, the CDC, HHS, DHS, FEMA, USAID, DOD and Navy naval reactors, the White House, President Obama, and he called for a worst case scenario, so we know he had an idea what was going on. Corporate wise, you had Bechtel and GE were involved, and like I said, the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Association, INPO, International Nuclear Power Plant Operators, if I got that right, and the NEI, National Energy Institute, which had a password-protected database where the rooftop grabs from our nuclear power plants here in the United States, when they picked something up, unless it was super low and minuscule, it was forwarded up the chain of command to a password database. So part of what's really big in this is just the size and scope, the staggering scope of this cover-up when you look at who all was involved, and when you compare that again to the fact when we begin to look at the thyroid study coming in by Sherman Mangano, I'm sure Radchick has touched upon that, and if you look at the initial assessment of the fatality index study by Sherman Mangano, and also Bobby One's got a very detailed, in-depth study that goes forward to the year 2030, where he's projected 1.3 million American fatalities. So you put that in line with the cover-up, and you see just that the fact that human lives are being sacrificed to protect industry. And many of you already know children's cells divide at a higher rate. That's why they talk about children thyroid doses in the documents, and they're very concerned about that. And there's plenty of evidence they were modeling for the United States and Alaska and Midway and California, so on and so forth. Okay, also in the documents, they mention a number of times that they have the benefit of knowing all about Chernobyl. Okay, and the premier study on Chernobyl is the Cost and Consequences study. Let me bring it up here on my screen real quick. Chernobyl, Consequences of the Catastrophe for People and the Environment. And this is on file at the Annals of the New York Academy of Sciences. And so in the documents, when they say they have the benefit of knowing all about Chernobyl. That's what they know. And when you look at that study and look at the fatality projections for Chernobyl, well, it's over 900,000, right? Because it's not just the initial blast, people died, it's latent cancers that really kick in. Now, I remind you at Fukushima, unit number 3 was a MOX fuel, and when you read about that, it's extremely dangerous because it's carried aloft in aerosol, a gaseous form, and that's what we worried about our Navy ships and our sailors who were in close proximity at the time. So they know all about Chernobyl. Now, they're not going to act on that knowledge. This is about a cover-up, 3 Mile Island cover-up. There's a cover-up in Chernobyl by Russian authorities. We even had a saltwater reactor here that I've heard was a cover-up. We had a meltdown. And a lot of people don't know that the Navy had a purposeful, some 13, 14, 15 odd meltdowns in Utah back in the 80s and late 70s just to test and see what happened in a meltdown. Also, although the NRC and our authorities say potassium iodine is not a big deal, you don't really need to have it, don't sweat it, not to worry about it. All throughout these documents, boy, are they sweating potassium iodine. They're shipping hundreds of thousands of units to the Japanese. If one of the NRC leaves his doses at home, there's a big stink about it. Hey, he left his doses, get him some more doses of potassium iodine. So whilst on the one hand, they tell us over here, we're not a big deal, we don't stock it, and it's just one, it only protects you against iodine anyway. On their trip to Fukushima, they ain't leaving without potassium iodine. Okay, also, I've got an article on the Navy ships and RADs, and where I discovered a couple documents that show what looks like they had plenty of foreknowledge. They should have moved our Navy ships and sailed them west into the wind. And when you look at these documents, clearly they were running worst case scenarios. They were modeling a worst case scenario, but they never acted on a worst case scenario. And that's one of the big things I push out there, because whilst our sailors are suing TEPCO, I've got a couple documents with evidence that I'm asking to be forwarded to these sailors that show, hey, it looks like Navy reactors and NRC and admirals had a pretty good idea. They should have moved those ships. But to protect the nuclear industry, if you move the ships, if you make any move to admit there's a problem or take countermeasures, again, that's admitting there's a problem, and they cannot do that. They can't. If many of you will remember, the Surgeon General right after Fukushima came out and said you might want to have potassium iodine, might not be a bad idea. Then a couple hours later, she came back out again in the press to say, I made a mistake, no, you don't really need it. It was almost as if she got a phone call. So that's the way some of these things work. Response to nuclear catastrophe is inhibited. In particular, the ability to speak freely and communicate openly, because participants know they're being recorded and their emails saved. Throughout these documents, they make references to the Freedom of Information Act, that we're being recorded, cut the conversation, you're getting a little too carried away. 2 guys are having a conversation about the melt through, sublimating through the concrete down to the torus, and the guy says, okay, guys, okay, chill out there, we're being recorded. And this is a serious problem. If there's an incident in the United States, their ability to respond to that is going to be restricted, simply because they don't want to be open and honest about the true nature of what happens in a major catastrophe such as Fukushima.
And I think we should start talking again about that, because there's been, like you said, 3 Mile Island was a major one, and people were supposed to, it was supposed to not be a big deal. It was a huge deal. And there was many deaths attributed to this thing. But the only way you'll find that out is you look for the studies that were done by independent people. It's very, very, very ridiculous, the things that happened and the things that were covered up, and how much doses of radiation we've gotten over the years. These people are still dying over 3 Mile Island. And, we're not supposed to know about that. There was the Nuclear Regulatory Commission told Congress it didn't know, and still doesn't know, how much radiation was released at 3 Mile Island or where it went. The government did not care. They used unsubstantiated estimates of how much radiation was released. The government issued average doses allegedly received by people in the region, which it assured the public were safe. But the estimates were utterly meaningless, and other things ignoring the likelihood of high doses concentrated fallout that would have came down heavily on specific areas, which obviously would have been modeled, because by then they would have already known about. Actually, I don't even remember if that was before. Was that before or after Chernobyl? I can't remember the date of the 3 Mile Island incident off the top of my head.
It was the beginning of the 9.
Okay, yeah. Because Chernobyl was, what, 66? No, 1986. Okay, so it was a little bit before. So they didn't have the benefit of Chernobyl like he was talking about. They had that afterwards. They had that for Fukushima.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you have for me on this?
On PMI?
Yeah, and then tie that into Chernobyl. I mean, not Chernobyl, but Fukushima, and let's get into the nitty-gritty here.
Well, what I've seen is there's a cover-up on all of these nuclear accidents, quote-unquote accidents. There was problems with communication back in 79 with the operation, and how a lot of things were covered up in all of these incidents. They had, let's see, I'm reading from an article here, and it says, McCarthy told Extra that right now society spends far too much on nuclear safety. It's not a question of whether we are going to use nuclear energy, he said. The sun is a fusion reactor with no shielding on it. What we're really talking about is whether we are going to bring the nuclear reactions closer so that we can control them. And the TV show Extra that was airing back in 93 from the NBC broadcast network goes on to saying that what they did was horrible. I can understand editing, but here are the most crucial statements were edited out to make it look like everything was hunky-dory. She said her full statement was that she is not as afraid since the 3 Mile Island Citizen Monitoring Network, a group she works with, had set up an extensive network of radiation monitors around the plant. So we're dealing with a lot of cover-up and a lot of, trying to keep things on the down low or hush-hush with these industries. And that's just from that incident alone. With the Plume-Gate, however, Patrick Henry, or Hattie, he's put together a lot of information, and as I was mentioning earlier, I had some time this past weekend to go over a lot of that material and to read it, and I'd like to read a little bit of that if you don't mind.
Please do.
Okay. Let's see. There's also, if you're able to provide it to the readers later on, update the show notes maybe if you don't already have it there, I'm not sure. But the book is Something Wicked This Way Comes, The Story of Plume-Gate by Patrick Henry. And he has a website also, patrickhenryunbound.wordpress.com, where you can go and find a lot of his material. What I've seen, the damage of, I'm reading from the book as of now, the damage of the Fukushima Daiichi facility was much greater, and the ability to respond was much more difficult than we had been led to believe. There is a reference to a 46-foot tsunami, the height of which was measured by TEPCO on walls of Unit 1 and 2. There is evidence Spent Fuel Pool, SFP, number 4 and 3 went dry, experiences zinc fire, and were melt on the floor. The NRC and the naval reactors were concerned if the melt of fuel in the spent fuel pools would reach ablation temperature and burn through concrete and rebar in the torus below. At times, those rates at the facility were lethal or near lethal, and as such, workers were at times unable and unwilling to make repairs. So, a question that came to mind as I was reading this over the last couple of days was, where were they getting these workers from? And so I did some research on my own, and I found, unbelievably, I found that this is kind of controversial here, but I found that the Yacuza Mafia was contributing to some of the workers there, and that's, I know that sounds unbelievable maybe to the listeners, but the Yacuza Mafia had ties with this nuclear plant there, and I'd like to pull up that information and read from where I found that and let you know, and the audience also know how I come across this.
Oh yeah, please do, because actually, I doesn't surprise me, to be honest, because I've been looking at what Benjamin Fulford had to say about the entire ordeal, and he
I also
often
found that today.
Yeah, he often talks about the Yakuza having how should I say this, ties to the Illuminati, different esoteric groups who help control the planet. The Cabal is a bunch of splintered secret societies who are all over the place. And the Yakuza being involved with all that does not surprise me in the slightest, because they're used as pawns to, bring drugs in, bring all kinds of stuff in, that aren't quote unquote supposed to be there, but they make money off of them. I mean, that's how all the black budget programs and all these different secret societies make their money. A lot of them make money through, smuggling drugs and doing these kinds of disasters and doing hedge bets on them, for example. Like, say, the guy who owned the Twin Towers took out a giant, not too long before they happened or whatever, he took out a giant, Silverstein, I think is his name. He took out a big, insurance. Basically, he betted that they would, I think it was, he betted that it destroyed. I need to dig that up because I can't remember exactly, all the details of that, but he made a lot of money off the towers being destroyed, and yet they were his property. So, that's something extremely interesting to me, to understand that was going on behind the scenes, that they make money off of this. And I think one of the big movies that blew the whistle on that was that one Bond movie. It wasn't. I think it was Casino Royale. It was whatever one they had the plane in, and the plane was supposed to be this technological marvel or whatever, a very big plane, and then the guys who were conspiring to have it destroyed, they had bet against the plane, the company that was creating the plane, and they had bet against it in the stock market. They had shorted it, because they knew that it was going to be destroyed. In the movie, obviously, MI6 was able to stop it, but MI6 is part of all of this. That's one of the big scams that they play on all of this, is all the secret societies, and all the CIA, all of these quote unquote supposed to be the good guys, the good intelligence agencies. They're all part of this, and they're all at the control and behest of them. The secret societies, they control them all. But at the same time, I'm not going to say there isn't good people within the organizations, and they're all compartmentalized, so not all of them know what in the world's going on or what they're doing and whenever they're doing it. A lot of whistleblowers in the NSA, like William Benny, has said, that a lot of them are good guys, but they just don't know what they're doing, because it's so compartmentalized and nobody's allowed to talk to each other about these things.
I see where you're coming from with that, yeah.
So please go ahead with that that you were going to bring out.
Okay, with the Yakuza, I found the article at telegraph.co.uk, and it's called How the Yakuza Went Nuclear. What really went wrong at the Fukushima plant? One undercover reporter risked his life to find out. On March 11, 2011, at 2:46 p.m., a 9.0 magnitude earthquake, and the scale of the earthquake has also been in question. I've seen several different reports online about maybe it wasn't a 9.0, perhaps it was, a 7.0 or 6.9 earthquake. So that's in question in itself. Struck Japan. The earthquake, followed by colossal tsunami, devastated the nation, together killing over 10,000 people. The earthquake also triggered the start of a triple nuclear meltdown at the Fukushima nuclear power plant, run by TEPCO, which is Tokyo Electric Power Company. Of the 3 reactors that melted down, one was nearly 40 years old, and that's way past, the limit of when they should, how long they should be running, and should have decommissioned 2 decades ago. Like I said, their lifespan should be about 20 years. The cooling pipes, the veins and arteries of the old nuclear reactors, which circulated fluid to keep the core temperatures down ruptured. Approximately 40 minutes after the shocks, the tsunami reached the power plant and knocked out their electrical system. Japan's Nuclear Industry Safety Agency, NISA, had warned TEPCO about safety violations and problems at the plant days before the earthquake. So they knew that there could be problems. However, they avoided going public about it, which to me kind of raises a red flag. Like, why are you keeping this so hush-hush? Why aren't you letting the public and the people of Japan know that their lives could be at risk? Okay, so
it was a planned event. That would be why. Keep going.
Yeah. I agree. Go ahead, Tim.
No, I said it was a planned event. I just keep going.
They've been warned about the possibility of a tsunami hitting the plant for years. The denials began almost immediately. There has been no meltdown, government spokesman Yuko Idano intoned in the days after March the 11th. It was an unforeseeable disaster. TEPCO's then president, Masataka, I'm not really sure how to pronounce this,
is all right.
Chimed in. As we now know, the meltdown was already taking place and the disaster was far from unforeseeable. TEPCO has long been a scandal-ridden company, caught time and time again covering up data on safety lapses at their power plants or... I'm sorry.
It's okay. Take your time.
Okay, let me see if I can find the page again. As the scale of the catastrophe at Fukushima became apparent, many workers fled the scene. To contain the nuclear meltdown, a handful of workers stayed behind, being exposed to large amounts of radiation, the so-called Fukushima 50. Among this heroic group, according to Suzuki, were several members of the Yacuza. The Yakuza are not a secret society in Japan. The government tactically recognizes their existence, and they are classified, designated, and regulated. Yakuza make their money from extortion, blackmail, construction, real estate, collection services, financial market manipulation, protection rackets, fraud, and a labyrinth of front companies, including labor dispatch services and private detective agencies. They do the work that no one else will do, or find workers for jobs no one else wants. And that's what I was mentioning earlier, when they found these 50,000 workers to come in and clean up after the disaster. Almost all nuclear power plants that are built in Japan are built taking the risk that the workers may well be exposed to large amounts of radiation, said Suzuki. That they will get sick, they will die early, or they will die on the job. So basically what happened was this Japanese mafia went and found poor people to work in the cleanup. And these are people that were what they called disposable, you know? Let me continue on here. Suzuki says that he's met over 1,000 Yakuza in his career as an investigative journalist and former editor of Yakuza fanzines. For his book, The Yakuza and the Nuclear Industry, Suzuki went undercover at Fukushima to find first-hand evidence of the long-rumored ties between the nuclear industry and the Yakuza. First, he documents how remarkably easy it was to become a nuclear worker at Fukushima. And I'm losing my place here. Bear with me.
And I just want to say, while you're getting your place, to the listeners, when she described what the Yakuza do to make money, fraud and they use extortion rackets and all this kind of stuff that they use in order to make their money. It just made me think of, it sounds exactly like what I view the government to be. The government is a mafia. It is a legalized, enforced mafia that has control over all the laws of the land. It's kind of ridiculous to me that, when you describe a mafia, you basically come up with what a government is. except that, they're a little bit more, how should I say this? They have a little bit more influence. Like I said, they write the laws so they can make their own rules. And it's interesting, very interesting to me that the Japanese government is very open and honest about this, as opposed to the U.S. government kind of wants to be the only one. However, they support all the, the drug running, and the CIA brings the drugs in, and then they also let their small people who are selling the drugs get arrested from time to time in order to pretend that they, have a care about quote-unquote justice and the war on drugs and all that crap. I mean, it's a dismal failure. But you got your place now?
Yeah, I do. Thank you so much for that. Suzuki discovered evidence of TEPCO subcontractors paying Yacuza front companies to obtain lucrative construction contracts. Money destined for construction work flying into Yakuza accounts, and of politicians and media being paid to look the other way. So, TEPCO, the electric company there in Japan, was paying the mafia front companies and to gain these contracts, construction contracts to rebuild, and paying the politicians and the media to look, to turn a blind eye to what was going on. And to me, that is just atrocious. How can you do that? I mean, but I guess that's how the real world works out there. You got the mafia tied with everything.
That's exactly what I was going to say too, because it's not just there; it's everywhere. That's how the world works. The media's controlled, everything's controlled, and they're all given handouts to keep the system running and keep people like looking in different directions and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's kind of ridiculous how all this continues to go on in the public eye without people realizing like just how corrupt all the systems are. I mean, that's exactly what corporate lobbying is in the United States in the political system.
Even here, it happens even here. And, I guess if you live the sheltered life, you don't want to, think about those things actually happening, but they do.
Far more often than we know.
Yeah. I'm going to continue on here with this.
Keep going.
Thank you. His fellow workers found Suzuki were a motley crew of homeless, chronically unemployed Japanese men. So these were the poor. These were the unwanted, the disposable, as I said earlier, the disposable people that nobody wants, homeless, and debtors who owed money to the Yakuza. So those, there could have been, what do you call it when the mafia comes and forces you to do something?
Wouldn't that be extortion? Or is it yes.
So there could have been extortion involved with this. And mentally handicapped. So they were having the undesirables, the unwanted, the disposable people to come in and clean up Fukushima.
Most of them are probably dead.
That is sad.
Yeah, most of them are probably dead by now. No, I just said most of them are probably already dead by now. Oh. Just keep going. Just talk over me. It's okay.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to.
No worries.
Suzuki claims the regular employees at the plant were given better radiation suits than the Yakuza recruits. TEPCO has admitted that there was a shortage of equipment in the disaster's early days. The regular employees were allowed to pass through sophisticated radiation monitors, while the temporary laborers were simply given hand rods to monitor their radiation exposure. When Suzuki was working in the plant in August, he had to wear a full-body radiation protective suit and a gas mask that covered his entire face. The hot summer temperatures and a lack of breathability in the suit ensured that almost every day a worker would keel over with heat exhaustion and be carried out. They would invariably return to work the next day. Going to the bathroom was virtually impossible, so workers were simply told to hold it. According to, that's pretty bad, pretty rough work conditions there. That's just like going to a temp agency here in America like Megaforce and being told, our regular workers who are working for this industry, food industry plant, whatever, are going to get, decent treatment. However, we're going to give you this, we don't care about your safety. We don't care about the potential of you dying in this plant. You just work. And if you need to go to the bathroom or you need to relieve yourself or you need a break, you can't get it. That's really terrible work conditions.
Absolutely. It's unconscionable, obviously, honestly.
It is. And to imagine, we complain here in America about how hard we have it. I think really we need to recollect and be thankful for what we do have here. We may have it hard, with government being the way that it is. We definitely have it hard. It's no maybe to it. However, we still have more fortunate circumstances than a lot of these other countries. And to just imagine that Japan is one of the 3 top leading financial countries, Tokyo being one of the front runners in finances globally. So we're going to kind of need to do a reassessment of how bad things really are in comparison to other places when we consider stories like this one right here.
Absolutely.
The regular employees were allowed to pass through okay, I've already read that. According to Suzuki, the temperature monitors in the plant weren't even working and were ignored. Removing the mask during work was against the rules. No matter how thirsty workers became, they could not drink water. After an hour fixing pipes and doing other work, Suzuki says his body felt like it was enveloped in flames. Workers were not checked to see if they were coping. They were expected to report it to their supervisors. However, while TEPCO officials on the ground told the workers not to risk injury, it seemed that anyone complaining of the working conditions or fatigue would be fired. Few took their allotted rest breaks. Those who reported feeling unwell were treated by TEPCO doctors, nearly always with what Suzuki says was essentially cold medicine. The risk of radiation exposure was 100%. The mask, if their filters were cleaned regularly, which they were not, could only remove 60% of the radioactive particles in the air. Anonymous workers claimed that the filters themselves were ill-fitting. If they accidentally bumped their mask, radiation could easily get in. The workers' dosimeter badges, meanwhile, used to measure an individual's exposure to radiation, could be easily manipulated to give false readings. So this, for me, coming across information like this, it's like, we see the reality of events. It's bad enough we have this major cover-up of a nuclear meltdown. And then you come to realize that the ill treatment of workers there that were cleaning up the plants.
Wow. It's insane how much stuff is going on in all of this. Jim Stone was, he's a really good reporter. He's very prolific. He updates his site daily and tries to keep up with all kinds of interesting things. He has a lot to say about, Fukushima. He talks about the virus Stuxnet that was able to come in and mimic what it did is it was planted in the systems of Fukushima well before the event, like a couple of months before. And what it did was monitor what things are like normally. And then it learned how to shut off things and then continue to mimic normal so that the engineers there could not know what was actually going on behind the scenes because their instruments were lying to them. So, when this tsunami hit, technically the reactor was supposed to be built so that it could not be destroyed by a tsunami. Even though there were, warnings and it was old, it still was pretty solid. This thing was designed to be able to drop it on the ocean floor and it would never rupture, and that would be, the way of containing such a thing without it ever happening. So the virus, which, by the way, was used by Israel against Iran, and they bragged about it when they attacked their nuclear facility. And that's who it originated from as well. It originated from Mossad. But, I don't like to point fingers too much. It's very, very, very interesting and very strange, but the program is designed to go in and it's supposed to, look at what's normal and then be able to mimic that after it goes and destroys the facility, so that it looks like everything's just fine. And then I guess for a very long time after the disaster, a lot of the readings were still coming back as normal, even though it was obvious that the thing had melted through. And then there's he also talks about, he ran into a lot of information and dug up a lot of stuff. On his site, I have it linked. He has an awful lot of stuff about this. An extremely big amount of information and documents and all kinds of evidence to look into and this is not the first time this has happened, that the United States government was involved, or I should say the CIA and the was in full cooperation with the Japanese officials. They actually created this tsunami, that there really was no seismic event, that the seismic event was much smaller than it should have been. And what they did was they planted multiple small nuclear warheads on the seabed in order to trigger the tsunami, and it said that they actually put a nuke inside the facility itself to help bring down the whole facility itself. And it's very, very scary. They went to such lengths to fake this event and to create it and to kill all these people. It's absolutely insane. And there was also a huge plan in order to relocate a bunch of people to safe, quote-unquote, safe zones within North Korea. The implications of that are insane. I've heard a lot told about the idea that Japan is actually almost a proxy nation of North Korea, and North Korea is as a proxy nation and controlled by the CIA, and that the whole thing's basically a massive psyop. All this threatening and saber raising and all this stuff, and it's like their personal playground to do whatever they want over there to these people, and the regime, Kim Jong-il and Kim Jong-un, whoever's in charge over there, it's all a show. It's all a ridiculous show, and the Japanese government is deeply involved with what's going on in North Korea. It's very important to them, and it's one of their, it's involved with one of the secret societies that is in control of that part of the world. So, what else do we keep going? Oh yeah, keep going on like Fukushima, because we should get more into the stuff that the Freedom of Information Act and all that kind of stuff. Which direction do you want to go now? We have about 10 minutes or less or more, right around there, left.
Well, I like what you brought up just a few minutes ago about Jim Stone and Benjamin Fulford. And I found a really interesting article there. And if I could read some from it also, that would be great.
Go for it.
This is from truthnewsinternational.wordpress.com. And the title of the article is called Benjamin Fulford Explains the Nuclear Attacks on Fukushima, Japan. And this is from December the 3rd, 2013. And I do believe that this is material that come from Jim Stone, whom you mentioned previously. This is a letter to Mr. Stone from Benjamin Fulford, I think. Yes. And the letter reads as, Mr. Stone, first of all, thanks for your courageous and groundbreaking work on uncovering the Fukushima mass murder and terror operation. So perhaps it wasn't an incident or an accident. Perhaps it was a purposeful terror operation, instead of what we've been led to believe by the official story. I'm writing this email to provide you with forensic evidence that I have gathered on what the 3/11 tsunami attack was about and exactly who was involved. My sources for what I am about to write include Japanese military intelligence, former Prime Minister Naoto Kan, whom I have known personally for many years, members of the crew that smuggled the nuclear weapons used in the attack into Japan, members of both the French and British branches of the Rothschild family, senior CIA agent and a member of the team that actually drilled the nuclear weapons into the seabed before the 3/11 attacks. The first thing you need to know is that the attack was planned many years before it happened. The Japanese business magazine Yacuza, citing a CIA report, wrote in February of 2007 that the U.S. had decided that Japan was getting too much of its energy from nuclear power, and that if that trend continued, Japan would no longer be dependent on U.S.-controlled oil, and thus would no longer have to obey the U.S. The conclusion of the report was that the best way to ensure Japan remained a colony would be to destroy the Tokyo Electric Power Company, the people who ran the Fukushima plant. Senator J. Rockefeller, whose family controls, through foundations, General Electric, the manufacturers of the plant, was deeply involved in this operation. As a preliminary to destroying Japan's nuclear power generation capability, Westinghouse and GE sold their nuclear power plant manufacturing businesses to Toshiba and Hitachi. This was insider trading at the highest level, and Hitachi and Toshiba should sue. The ongoing attempt in recent years by an Asian secret society to wrest control of global finance from Western oligarch families is a bigger background to the Fukushima subplot. For example, Democratic Party of Japan Finance Minister Shoshi Nakawada was asked at a G7 meeting to hand over $100 billion to the cabal. He answered that he would raise the money by selling $100 billion worth of U.S. Treasury bonds. He was going to say this at the press conference that followed the G7 meeting, so he was drugged to prevent him from doing so. Later, when he returned to Japan, he was murdered by CIA death squads. Getting back to Fukushima, the refusal of the Japanese Democratic Party and authorities to hand over any real hard currency to the Western oligarch families resulted in the decision to go ahead with the Fukushima operation as a way of intimidating the Japanese once again into surrender and obedience. One key source of mine, who has variously gone by names of Richard Swords, Alexander Romanoff, etc., was part of a multi-agency Western ring involved in smuggling drugs into Japan. I have confirmed through a long-term acquaintance by the name of Steve McClure, a supposed music journalist, that Richard Swords was his long-term supplier of drugs. In any case, Swords told me that he was summoned to Pattaya, Thailand, by a member of the British Special Air Force, a South African going by the name of Spencer, and told to bring 70 kilograms of Thai stick marijuana heavily laced with mind-destroying chemicals, and approached me. He was told to tell me to introduce the Yacuza to him, or else I would be killed. The Yacuza told me it was a trap and to keep away from it, which I did. Swords also told me that when he was in Thailand, he was shown a 700-kiloton nuclear missile that was stolen from the sunken Russian submarine, the Kursk. This missile was smuggled into Japan together with the drugs. The man overseeing the smuggling operation was a former Hong Kong Deputy Police Commissioner by the name of Stevens. According to the surge and censor, the man in overall operational control of this operation against Japan was the General Richard Myers, according to the CIA and other sources.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
I only want to break in here for a minute because we don't have all that much time here. So we should start trying to wrap this up for this episode, and then we'll end up getting a lot more into all of this stuff. Next episode, obviously. So I was just Googling things, like I was, going ahead and looking for, I went and saw, I was on the same article you were, and I went and Googled, the guy, you mentioned, Soshi Nakawa, the Democratic Party Finance Minister, Soichi Nakagawa. All right, there we go. I got it. Very hard to do. Anyway, I just Googled him, and I still have up with the Wikipedia page, right? And this is just the normal stuff. During the G7 meeting of finance ministers on Rome on February 14th, 2009, he signed an agreement to lend an extra $100 billion to the IMF, which is described as the largest loan ever made in the history of humanity. Nagawa was seen to be slurring his words. He claimed that the drowsiness and slurred speech were a result of taking too much cold medicine before the meeting. And that completely, goes right in line with what Benjamin Fulford was saying, and he was actually drugged on purpose. And he also has a history of heavy drinking. So you're like, when we look at how the cabal controls, humanity and controls the politicians, they get them hooked into, bad habits on purpose. Whether it be child pedophilia, which is so rampant in the United States and Britain and all over the world, really. They get them hooked into these things so they can use them to harm them, to bribe them. So we're about to go here, and we're going to all come back into this later. Thank you very, very much for tuning in, and I hope that everybody has a good day. And this is Revising Reality signing out. And everybody, thank you very much. We'll see you next time.